Night settled heavily over the farmland of northern Iraq, swallowing the Tigris River and the scattered palm trees in a cloak of absolute darkness. On the evening of December 13th, 2003, the land around the village of Ad-Dor seemed asleep, unaware that history was about to break through its soil. Elite American Special Operations soldiers moved through the fields without lights, without voices, without hesitation. They were part of Task Force 121, hardened men trained for moments like this, yet even they were running low on patience and sleep. For days, they had chased fragments of intelligence across Iraq, raiding compounds that yielded nothing but dust and disappointment. 2 farms had already been searched that night. Both were empty. Again, for months, the most wanted man in the world had remained invisible. Saddam Hussein, former president of Iraq, once feared across the Middle East, now existed only as rumors, whispers, and fading photographs. To the soldiers, he was no longer a tyrant, but a phantom. Colonel James Hickey, the mission commander, glanced at his watch. Time was slipping away. Every passing minute increased the risk of exposure, ambush, or failure. The mission was approaching the edge of collapse, but this night carried something different. Parked behind the formation was an armored vehicle carrying no advanced surveillance system, no satellite uplink, no experimental technology. Instead, it held a man terrified, exhausted, and sweating despite the cold night air. His name was Mohammed Ibrahim. To American intelligence officers, he was known simply as the Fat Man. He had once been the head of Saddam Hussein's personal security detail, a man trusted with the dictator's life. Now he was shackled, frightened, and standing on the brink of betrayal. The soldiers pulled him from the vehicle and pushed him forward. Ibrahim walked slowly across the dirt, his boots crunching softly over gravel and trash. He approached what looked like nothing at all, just a patch of ground, littered with debris and covered by a faded rug. He stopped, hesitated, then nudged the earth with the tip of his boot. The movement was small, almost casual, but it changed history. The soldiers sprang into action, ripping the rug aside and scraping away the dirt beneath it. A white styrofoam lid emerged from the ground, camouflaged so perfectly it had been walked over countless times. When the lid was lifted, a wave of foul air burst upward, rotting, stale, unmistakably human. The opening beneath was narrow and vertical, a black shaft descending into the earth. Weapons were raised. Grenade pins were loosened. Orders were whispered. Then a voice rose from the darkness below, not commanding, not defiant, pleading. 2 filthy hands emerged first, trembling as they reached toward the light. Then a bearded man struggled upward, blinking against flashlights and night vision goggles. His hair was wild, his face gaunt, his posture broken. This was not the man from the murals or the television broadcasts. In English, his voice cracked as he spoke. "I am Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq. I am willing to negotiate." 9 months earlier, Iraq told a different story. Baghdad had fallen. Statues of Saddam were dragged down in front of cameras. The war, officially, was over. The United States controlled the streets, the skies, and the institutions of power. Yet in the shadows, the real battle had only begun. Despite overwhelming military superiority, American intelligence faced a humiliating reality. They had no idea where Saddam Hussein was. To simplify the hunt, the Pentagon introduced a symbolic strategy. A deck of playing cards was printed and distributed across the country. Each card featured a senior figure from the former regime: generals, ministers, party officials. Saddam Hussein was the ace of spades. Thousands of soldiers carried these cards in their pockets, memorizing faces, checking names, hunting ghosts. But the strategy failed. Arrests piled up, interrogations multiplied. Yet none of Saddam's inner circle revealed his location. The trail went cold. Inside a suffocating interrogation room at Tikrit Airfield sat a man few would have noticed. Sergeant Eric Maddox did not look like an intelligence prodigy. He was exhausted, his eyes bloodshot, his uniform stained with sweat. He was not a commander, not a strategist, not a celebrity officer, but he was paying attention. On the wall in front of him hung a chart filled with photographs of Iraq's former elite. Maddox stared at it for hours, then did something unexpected. He ripped it down. A dictator on the run, he reasoned, would not trust generals or politicians. Power had failed him. Titles meant nothing. Blood, however, meant everything. Maddox shifted the entire approach. Instead of interrogating high-ranking officials, he targeted drivers, cooks, couriers, and guards, the invisible people who had been dismissed as unimportant. Slowly, a new network emerged. Lines were drawn across whiteboards. Names repeated. Patterns formed. One family name surfaced again and again: the Al-Musalat clan. They were not politicians. They were protectors, members of Saddam's tribe, bound by loyalty older than the state itself. At the center of this web sat a name no one had focused on before: Mohammed Ibrahim, the head of personal security, the fat man. Finding him proved nearly impossible. He moved constantly, rarely slept in the same place, and trusted only blood relatives. Maddox adjusted again. If Ibrahim could not be found, his family would be. Interrogations intensified. This was Iraq in 2003, during the era later remembered with shame and controversy. The walls of Abu Ghraib cast long shadows across every interrogation room. Under relentless pressure, Ibrahim's son eventually broke. "My father likes fishing," he said. To most ears, it meant nothing. To Maddox, it was everything. Months earlier, Saddam's former chef had described the dictator's obsession with grilled fish, particularly mascoof. Suddenly, fishing was no longer a hobby. It was a logistical clue. The provider followed the appetite. A raid was launched on a fish farm near Samarra. Ibrahim was gone, but a relative was captured. The interrogation that followed was brutal and short. The man gave up an address in Baghdad, an ordinary apartment in the busiest part of the city. Maddox's deployment was ending. His bags were packed. His flight home was scheduled for the next morning. This was his last chance. Special forces stormed the apartment. Several men were detained, hoods placed over their heads. None matched Ibrahim's description. Desperate, Maddox interrogated one detainee again. Hours later, the truth surfaced. Mohammed Ibrahim had been there. He was still there. Maddox ran into the courtyard, tearing hoods off prisoners one by one. Then he saw him, a heavy-set man, eyes wide with fear. The hunt was over. What followed remains disputed. Official accounts describe a clean psychological victory, promises of money, safety for family, cooperation in exchange for mercy. But the reality of that era suggests a harsher truth. Whatever methods were used, Ibrahim broke. "I will show you," he said. And so the convoy moved north toward Ad-Dar. To understand why Saddam was there, one must return to the days after Baghdad fell. Stripped of power, Saddam became a man without a home. He sought refuge with allies, tribes, former confidants. One by one, they refused him. Fear outweighed loyalty. At last, he turned to a modest farm owned by the Namik family, members of his own tribe. It was the same place where he had once hidden decades earlier after a failed assassination attempt. For over 200 days, Saddam lived quietly in a small room inside a mud hut. He was not buried underground like an animal. The infamous hole was only an emergency shelter. Built by Allah Namik, it was a vertical bunker reinforced with brick and cement, barely large enough to sit in. Air came through a single plastic pipe. It was designed to hide, not to live. When patrols passed, Saddam descended into darkness. When they left, he returned to the hut. He listened to radio broadcasts. He wrote poetry. He issued instructions to insurgent commanders through Allah, his only connection to the outside world. But trust, once broken, is fatal. Weeks before the capture, Mohammed Ibrahim visited the farm. Saddam stepped out briefly. Ibrahim asked Allah where the leader would hide during a raid. Allah answered. That secret was later sold. Back in Ad-Dar, the operation nearly failed. 600 soldiers surrounded the area. Delta Force tore the hut apart. Nothing. Doubt crept in. Then Ibrahim was brought forward. Without hesitation, he walked to the exact spot. The dirt was cleared, the lid revealed. A grenade was ready. Then the voice, Saddam Hussein, emerged from the ground and surrendered without resistance. His Glock pistol was confiscated. The myth died that night. The next day, humiliating images flooded the world. Medical examinations, open mouths, lice checks. The Lion of Babylon was reduced to a man. 3 years later, on a cold morning in Baghdad, Saddam Hussein was executed. The chamber echoed with insults and chants. There was no dignity, only vengeance. His death did not bring peace. It brought chaos. The spider hole was not just where Saddam was found. It was where Iraq's future collapsed.